Welcome to another How to Succeed podcast. This is the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. We are talking with Tom Nation, a Sandler trainer from Southwest England, and we're going to be talking about how to succeed at prospecting in 2024. Big topic today, brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training. For more information, you can go to Sandler.com, find all our locations and the big enterprise team there as well. And don't forget, the Sandler Summit. Still virtual tickets available. You can come check that out or make plans to be there next year. In case you're listening to this after the summit, it was March 19th and 20th. So hopefully you made it there and hopefully you enjoyed it. If not, we will circle back and share all those recordings with you as well. But right now we have live Tom Nation from Sandler in the UK. Tom, tell us about succeeding at prospecting in 2024. Is it any different than prospecting in 1994? What do you think?
Well, I think it's probably slightly different, Mike. But I think a lot of it is probably still the same in terms of what you need to do to be successful, and a lot of that in terms of the attitudes that you need. But no, thank you for having me on, by the way. And looking forward to discussing a little bit more about the ways prospecting has changed, perhaps, but also some of those fundamentals that are really key still, like back 30, 40 years ago, is probably still really relevant as well in terms of the success of that.
I think it's interesting, as somebody that's been around for Sandler for about 30 years, and Sandler's been around for 57. Some of the psychological principles and the behavior of humans hasn't changed. But obviously prospecting methods, techniques, and stuff that we'll get into later definitely have, right? When people started with Sandler 50 years ago, they were mostly door knocking and showing up at people's door. Now we have AI. We can send video through email. We can do all kinds of different social networking and connections and stuff there. So the tools change, but maybe the psychology doesn't. So let's start there with the ideal attitude for prospecting in 2024. I hear bad attitudes myself a lot, like prospecting doesn't work. You can't cold call anybody now after the pandemic because they're all working from home on their cell phones. People don't have office lines and stuff like that. Do you believe any of that hype? What's true, what's not true? Help us with our attitude this year.
Yeah. So and it's funny, actually, I was going to say exactly the same thing. That's what I hear in terms of, and it's most of the time it's a negative thing as well. What doesn't work, like you said, Mike, cold calling doesn't work, it's cold calling's dead, all that sort of negative ideas mainly come from people you speak with, and most of the time it's because they're probably just doing it ineffectively. There's nothing wrong. Cold calling's really, I find it, from my opinion, is really effective still. But then one of the things that I think is really key and worth mentioning is that you do need to focus on your strengths as well. So if cold calling is a strength, which it is for me, I'm going to focus on that and perhaps networking, because again, I feel quite comfortable talking to people in a face-to-face scenario. So I think it is really important that you do, if you've identified what you're really good at, it is important to focus on that as well, I think.
That's a great point, because I am a public speaker and entertainer by trade. So the podcasts work really great for me. I can invite prospects on to the show, or free talks and going to trade shows and things like that. Of getting me out in front of people seems to be a lot more comfortable for me, and still work whenever I speak and get to share my thought leadership with people. Somebody raises their hand and says, "Hey, I have a question," and we go, "Oh, maybe we should talk about that more after we're done," right? And that gives me an opportunity to create conversations. The one we haven't mentioned yet is social media, email marketing. A lot of these things I feel like kind of go up and down, that maybe there's trends where email might work, or my email might work depending on how you do it. But if you just spam everybody, no. So help us out with this ideal attitude. If you were going to design and build the perfect prospector for 2024, what would they sound like? How would they think?
I think, first of all, Mike, it's you mentioned a couple of things there, but I think the first thing is really key, is that whoever you are, if you're a salesperson, you need to build a prospecting plan. You need to have a plan in place, so you have a list of actions day to day, week to week, in order to achieve what your prospecting targets are going to be. That's the first thing that you need to do. And then secondly, and I think you touched on it, is you need to have a multi-channeled approach to outreach and prospecting, because calling won't work all the time. I do a lot of cold calling, and it's still, you still have to put a number in to get, perhaps a little return, but combine it with email and networking and LinkedIn and face-to-face talks and free talks and
referrals.
And referrals. Yeah, combined with that in a multi-touch channel approach, that is the only way really to be successful, because some people are never going to answer your cold call, but they might answer your email, and vice versa. So I think that the key to that is that you need to build in a list of activities, focus, maybe bring in a couple of those strengths as well, but then utilize all of them on a daily basis to really build out this multi channel approach to prospecting. And that, I feel that in this 2024, that's the only way to get enough new opportunities in the pipeline and speak to lots of new people and prospects, because people don't like to be contacted through certain channels, and they do like to be contacted through others. And it's just finding out, what a person, prefers. So
yeah, those are two of my favorite tips. The easiest way to find out is to ask them. Is say, hey, do you prefer email, phone call, text message? What's the best way to get a hold of you? And people will tell you, because they have those strong preferences, right?
Yeah, you'd rather them tell you that, wouldn't you? So yeah.
And I'm kind of that way, because I'm recording and on webinars and stuff a lot. There are times where I just can't answer my phone, right? So email is usually the best way, because that's asynchronous and I can reply to it when I get a time. And I'm sure we all have channels that get built up. Like if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I would love to connect with you and chat, but depending on what's going on, I might have tens, dozens, or hundreds of direct messages from prospects in LinkedIn, and it's just a crowded channel. And I think it's important to think about that as a salesperson. And like you said, vary that for the prospect, but also don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? That used to be a Sandler rule that's been around for a long time, and I think still applies, is that sure, we want referrals, we want warm leads, we want those marketing leads coming in that we can just call and they say, yes, I'm looking for your product or service. But most of the time we're in sales in like a BDR role, because not enough of those are coming in to support the company and ourselves, right? If they had referrals and marketing leads just flowing in, we wouldn't need a BDR. So
yeah, I think
cold
you're
calling
right.
has to be a part of that, active outreach, networking, something. If you're working several things, you can find what's working, or if one is or is not for a certain period of time, you can adjust and you can still feed your family while you're going through that.
And I think you again, you touched on it there. I think it's this whole idea around being proactive, and I think that is that is the key to prospecting, because I heard someone, don't ask me who said it, but someone said that the ideal time to prospect is when you're doing well. Don't wait until the pipeline's drying up. Go in with that mindset that if you're doing well, you're generating lots of new business, the sales are going well. That's the perfect time to carry on prospecting and keep building that continuous stream of leads, because not only does that help the business, but also from a mindset point of view. How better is it to go into a cold call knowing that you can actually say, I don't need this business, and fully believe that as well. That has a huge impact on the whole that attitude piece.
That is massive. I think you really hit something critical there that we see regardless of any year, but even more now, that when people are prospecting, we need to not need the business, right? When we get desperate, we get commission breath, and that turns people off, and then it works less, and it kind of spirals downwards. Then we get more desperate, and the more we get desperate, the less likely we are to get an appointment, and it kind of goes bad way. And so the right way is to relax, to reach out in this way. And I wanted to ask you another one that we get all the time when we teach prospecting is that sort of line of assertiveness, of being too pushy and doing direct, proactive outreach. A lot of people push back on that. And a lot of people are also too passive. They just never ask for the business, or they never ask anybody. I had one client one time tell me they were bragging about it. 100% of our business comes from referrals, and they were proud of that. And they should be, that they can keep their business going that way. But they're also not trying hard enough. You're not growing fast enough. You're not reaching people that need your product or service because you're not doing proactive outreach, right? There are people that you can help, that they would desperately need your product or service and love it, but you're not reaching them because you're solely being reactive in this. So can you tell us a little bit about, in 2024, do you think that line has moved up or back? Do you think more people need to be proactive and maybe more assertive in their prospecting, or do they need to be less assertive these days?
I think both, actually, but to try and give you a better answer than that, I think there is a line, isn't there, between being assertive and then perhaps dialing up or dialing down that sort of tone. Because I know from my own experience, my background before sales was hospitality, so I've been on a journey myself to bring in that more assertiveness in my sales process. So that's been something that I've had to work on and be aware of. But there are times where you need to dial that up and dial that down. And I think that's something I learned from Matson, actually. I think he came over to the UK and was very sort of clear on that. There are certain times where it really does need you to be, far more assertive than being sort of behind the pendulum in that sense.
Yeah, and I like the analogy at Sandler of the velvet covered brick. Like, we want to be soft to the touch. We want people to welcome us and be casual in our conversation, but we also want to be firm when pushed against, right? Like, we want to have some substance there and some commitment to what we're doing. And if we can get that velvet covered brick balance, then we're doing the best for the most amount of people. And I think that really nails the attitude part, so we can move to the behavior part.
Yeah, sure.
And
yeah,
look, we teach cookbook at Sandler, which means you need a recipe for your own success. It depends, right, is the answer for every client, on how many calls, how often, what do we need to do to be successful. We already talked about the plan a little bit, but I wanted to ask you about frequency and cadence of this, because I see a lot of common mistakes here. So in 2024, do you feel like we need more outreach to be faster and keep up with the faster pace of change, and people will, move on, call the next person and stuff if we don't respond to a lead or we're not moving fast enough? Or do you feel like it's maybe a slower cadence of giving people space and not coming off as aggressive? I think this is another one where kind of how much prospecting you're doing depends on the situation, the clients, and what you're selling. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it depends really on. I think first of all that there needs to be some consistency, and that needs to be built in your daily habits. But I think the key is to tell yourself that you are a consistent person, that you will follow those. I am consistent every day in these behaviors. Because that's vital that you do that. And to answer your question, I think. I think it's a bit of both, really, Mike. I think it's a case where you need to be personalized in terms of your outreach, but then I think you need to be you need to identify what is an on-profile prospect to you and your business at any one time, because that may change as well. And I think for me and personally, when I prospect, I think it's making sure that, first of all, that they're an ideal client. They fit the right criteria, perhaps in terms of employees and how many salespeople they've got, if they've got a team, if I can find out the details around the revenue, But I think another key thing is like, it's identifying what triggers I can call them or engage with them and make it relevant in terms of what we offer here at Sandler. And I think that is real key, because so often, and you've seen it yourself, Mike, the outreach can be really poor. and really sort of unpersonalized and quite, broad and just sent out to the masses. Where
spammy, pushy,
yeah,
like overgeneralized.
yeah. And I think nothing's changed in that respect. I think, more so, I think more time should be spent on what triggers, can I utilize to contact this prospect to say, we might be able to help you based on what I've seen. It might not be the case, but it could be. And is it worth having a conversation? And I think definitely for myself, that's something I've worked on incredibly hard in terms of what can I find on LinkedIn, what can I see on their website, what can I utilize as a trigger to to reach out to these people and and say this is the reason, and have a valid reason for reaching out.
I love that. And I want to summarize it for everybody because I think you hit on like 3 really powerful things. Number 1 is when there is a trigger, we need to be fast. We need to act fast. You and I help people hire salespeople. If we see them post a job posting, we want to contact that company and see if we can help them. If we wait 90 days, they got the position filled, we can't help anymore. We missed that opportunity. I think that's a good analogy for a lot of people with these triggers. The second thing you said is, if we're really good at identifying our ideal client and we know this is a qualified opportunity, we need to be committed, consistent, showing up. Maybe we're doing even account-based marketing and long-term prospecting for a whale of a client or somebody that we know needs our help. We need to be there and keep this continuous cadence to beat that drum with them until they're open and willing to speak. And if they're not qualified, we can just stop. Right. We can say, nope, not a good time. I don't want to work with these people. That's fine. Take them off the list and get out of there. And then the third thing I heard also is, for ourselves, there needs to be some sort of follow-up cadence and commitment to do what it takes to help the right people or get a deal across the line. Like, just because we go out and make one outreach and they didn't return our first phone call doesn't mean they're disqualified and we take them off. But like, we need some sort of plan that is a prospecting sequence, not just one prospecting effort. Is that fair? And can you tell us maybe a little bit of what a cadence looks like in 2024?
Yeah, sure. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, because, deals are done in the follow-up, aren't they? And most of the people that engage with my outreach, it's typically maybe 2, 3, or 4, fourth message or touch point down that line. It's rarely often the first time you try and do that. But yeah, in terms of the automation piece that you mentioned, I think it ties into what technology is available. You touched on it earlier on in terms of AI, but I think it's in 2024. It's about making salespeople's lives easier, and actually giving them the tools and technology to actually spend more time selling. Because I think the stats out there prove that a huge amount of time spent by salespeople is in this unselling area, where they spend most of their day, when they need to be more so in the proactive and the selling piece. But you need automation to be able to reach the amount of activities or behaviors you need to do every day. So I think there's a big piece around automation, and things like HubSpot and Zoom Info and various different tools can help salespeople, get in front of more on-profile prospects, engage throughout that process, where they don't need a call every time. It might be the automation side of it might help share some resources or some white papers or, knowledge in between. And again, like you said, Mike, they might not be ready to buy at the first stage of interaction. So that automation piece nurtures that lead, meanwhile, and may sort of then help us re-engage at a certain time when perhaps they are willing and able to buy or in a better situation to do that. So the automation side of things is huge in terms of building that into your cadence. And, a cadence, one thing I think I'd like to mention as well, because cadences can be quite complex, depending on the size of the business. And, from my own experience, I think sometimes simplifying that cadence can be really as effective as building a completely complex one that has 20 touch points and all sorts of things. So, from my experience, I've found just calling a prospect maybe 3 times before then maybe engaging with a couple of emails and something else, it tends to sort of tell me that maybe they're never going to pick up the phone. And I think typically after that 3rd call, if they're not going to do that, I think there's a higher percentage of them never doing that. So that's a nice little tactic maybe to figure out whether or not they may ever pick up the phone. But I think that's worth just mentioning, because I think sometimes we can get lost in the hedgerow with so much like cadence touch points, when actually sometimes it might just be easier to simplify that as well.
I think so too, and there's a lot of tools that can simplify these touch points. And I think this takes us to our technique portion. But I love what you're saying there about stop doing stuff that's not working, right? If you're leaving voicemails and they're not getting returned, stop leaving voicemails. Send a text message, send an email, send a video, carrier pigeon, whatever you got going on. Like, find a different way that works through. And I think we should also talk a little bit about the spacing. I'm assuming you're with me that we don't need to be super aggressive and trigger these sequences like every day and just beat somebody into a submission, but we're spacing these out, giving them at least 36 hours between calls, or 2 or 3 days, and then try an email, give them a couple days to respond, follow up with a phone call. And to me, tying back to our attitude, the ideal process is here, we let them know that we're serious, we're committed. This isn't just a flyby spam. There's a reason we're reaching out, and we expect to talk to them at some point. And that they can say no at any point too. So you can just say, hey, if this isn't working, shoot me back a text and say, nope, we're good, we got it, and I'll take you off the list, and I'll stop that cadence, because I think that's where I see a lot of this techniques going wrong in 2024 is a lot of robot spam. Again, I mentioned I get a ton of LinkedIn requests, and all of them are in the same format that I'm pretty sure that person didn't even log in or look at my profile, because it had a trigger word in it, but it wasn't the stuff that they're pitching me, right? Because I have podcast host on my profile. I get a lot of podcast production services, submissions for guests and things, and it'd be like, oh, I love your show, it looked like this, blah blah blah, and it's like the same format message from 10 people in a row. I'm pretty sure that I don't need to respond to any of those, right? Because they're not real humans. And that, to me, the humanity in our sequences and our follow-up and our automation is kind of the key to success here.
And you raise a really massive point there, because there can be a fine line between crossing over that automation line, and then it turns into this unpersonalized spammy sort of type of message. And you can sort of see why people get into that stage if you're a salesperson, because you want to try and reach as many people as possible. But I think that there's a fine line there between going over that and then coming across as every other typical salesperson. So I think there's a way that we need to try and manage and utilize automation and tools to our advantage, but don't maybe leave that sort of negative taste in your mouth of the prospect by coming across like every other salesperson, I think, as well.
So what are some of your best tips, tricks, and hacks for 2024? I feel like I've been stealing a lot of the low-lying fruit and making you work hard. So I'm going to give you first crack at this one. What are some of your favorite tools, maybe scripts, lines, tactics? What's working for you these days?
Yeah, so I think I touched on it earlier on, but cold calling still really effective for me. What
does that sound like for you, or what does it look like?
Yeah, for me, it's I've been blessed to have a great coach in terms of Andy McCready. So he's been a great sort of use or resource for me. But in terms of my my opening, it's very permission based opener. Hey Mike, I know I'm calling you out the blue here. Do you mind if can I take 30 seconds to tell you the reason for the call, and perhaps you can tell me if it makes sense for us to carry on. So it's a very permission based opener. It's funny you bring this up, actually, because I picked up some. I really like what Emily Eaps is doing at Sandler in terms of bringing the strokes into the talk tracks, those modern day talk tracks, and that's definitely something I've been trying to utilize more of, in terms of, leading with the fact that, your company is successful, because most of the time they've got to the place, they are pretty successful, and they've got to a certain level based on that success. And I think it's really important that we adapt, to those modern talk tracks. And I really like what Emily was bringing into that, in terms of, most of the types of businesses we speak with are successful. They've got a great product and great people, and but perhaps what's working now, is a little bit harder than what used to work. So I think that approach as well is something that is definitely worth.
Tell me a little bit about the list. Are you using Zoom Info? Or are you just doing your own prospecting research? How do you know who to cold call?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Zoom Info. I haven't been using it for a huge amount of time, but I'm fully aware of the types of tech that's available. But really, really sort of, I think Zoom Info is a great tool, and it's been a bit of an eye opener for me in terms of getting the right quality data. For me, mobile numbers is key, because I'm obviously a fan of cold calling, so I want to be able to have that data readily available. And that sort of syncs directly into LinkedIn as well, which is crucial in terms of actually pulling together a list and just being efficient at calling that list. So it's really quick and super easy to integrate and use. So Zoom Info has been a game changer in my eyes. Obviously HubSpot is all entwined in that. Then putting these prospects into a CRM that can be utilized to manage that relationship, and collect the data of the conversations, and obviously use the marketing side there to to nurture those people throughout as well. But one thing I'd like to sort of maybe touch on as well slightly, Mike, is the whole piece around setting yourself up to prospect as well. And I think that sort of maybe it falls into a bit of attitude as well, but just things, simple things like time blocking, time blocking your calendar to block out time for when you're going to cold call. And I know it's super easy to do, and I think a lot of people maybe see that as a bit of a it's a bit obvious really, but having those time blocks in your calendar that you stick to, and you're going to call and not be distracted between those times, I think again build that into your week, your planning, because I think it just helps put yourself in the right mindset to call or to prospect. And I think having it in your calendar is key. It's vital to be effective and successful, and plan around it, and organized, because it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, prospecting and having all these different sort of cadences everywhere.
Getting in that habit, and any type of tracker and measurement for your amount of activity, I think sometimes we fool ourselves, and we say, oh, I was really busy today, and we spent all day just responding to emails that were incoming, and we didn't actually do any proactive outreach or our planned behaviors for the day. So that's a huge tip. Also, since you mentioned calendar, I'll just throw out Calendly, or the HubSpot calendar link that you can use to set appointments and stuff. Has just been a massive game changer for me. That sometimes I actually ended up trying to set up a coffee with a friend of mine, and because they were a childhood friend, I wasn't using my scheduling link, and it has been brutal to even just find a time, and the number of text messages and emails and stuff back and forth. And I was like, oh, I forgot. Maybe I should just use my HubSpot link, because it's a heck of a lot easier for them to go and pick a time that's already available on the calendar.
And that's really great. Like you said, within HubSpot now, you can insert maybe 3 or 4 proposed times, and they can just choose one. And I think really the overall theme there is what can you do to create less friction between you and your prospect? Because if you can streamline that process, whether it be outreach, whether it be arranging meetings, and throughout the whole conversation, if you can streamline that and make it as frictionless as possible, it just improves the quality of the conversation, and overall it's building that trust, isn't it? It's always it's putting yourself in that position where you're coming across differently, and that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? We want to be seen as something different, something credible, and something they haven't seen before, because why else would they use us if we weren't acting differently and portraying something different than to what they've already had before.
Any other final thoughts or things you were hoping to mention today that we didn't get to?
Yeah, I think just one other thing really around perhaps the attitude piece, because I think that is a huge, your mindset around prospecting will either help or hinder you in that process. And I think if you go into calls or conversations truly believing that you'll bring value to that conversation, and I think for anyone that's been Sandler trained or they're here at Sandler, we're already in that 1% of salespeople that we can add. We are offering huge amounts of value in every conversation we have because we're Sandler trained. But I think that sort of piece, that's an ongoing journey, for myself and I'm sure for lots of salespeople. But I think that's critical, that if you truly believe that you're going to add value to the conversations you have, that will shine, that will come across, and your prospect will see that as well.
I love that. Equal business stature and mutual respect in these conversations really goes a long way. And it's a great point to wrap up there. Now, we've been talking with Tom Nation, a Sandler trainer from the southwest of England. And I wanted to get to know you a little bit better, Tom, since it's your first time on the show. At this point in your career, how do you define success?
How do I define success? I think I feel quite, I'm fairly early in my Sandler journey. I've been with the business for about 18 months now, so I'm very much at the start. But I think success for me is consistency. Is showing up. Is doing the behaviors which we've touched on, and always be learning. Be open to feedback and be coachable. I think that for me has been, if I can be a sponge and take in as much as possible, but then also act on, if someone's given me advice, I'll act on it, and I'll show them that I've listened to them and I'm willing and able to do what they've advised or coached me to do. So I think that's what's really driving me to be successful in this role. I think is being open to learning and keep striving for more, really.
Was there a biggest lessons learned or a failure you are most proud of in your career so far that taught you an important lesson?
Biggest failure. That's a hard one. I think, my background is, I think I touched on it, my background's hospitality before I got into sales. And I think, when I first got into sales, I was very much, openly admit, I was an order taker. There wasn't any sort of technique or expertise in that. And I failed a huge amount of time, in terms of, trying to engage with clients and prospects, and I'm sure my technique was awful as well. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that, I think you've got to put the time in as well. You've got to put that personal development time in, because actually failing is hugely important, and then being able to reflect on those fails again is critical for you to then improve. But I think putting that time in, I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts and reading books and putting myself in a position where I want to learn. So I think steering the course as well and going through those failures will only help you come out the other side.
I think it's an interesting lesson for people like you and I that you can be too nice in sales, and that's not kind to your prospects or yourself. You're not doing the right thing by people, and so sometimes you need to be more firm, or you need to ask a difficult question, or you need to make somebody feel uncomfortable in order to get them to the right outcome. And that's a strong lesson to learn. So I appreciate you sharing that. Last one. Do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
Yeah, it's a fairly I don't know. Again, I'm really bad, Mike, in terms of remembering where I heard this. It could have come from Andy, but I think I want the one I really like, and it sticks with me, is it's quite a simple one. If you do the behaviors, the results will come. And I think it just falls back into this prospecting thing. And actually, if you do the behaviors and focus on the behaviors and not the outcome, I think it just helps you focus on detaching from the outcome, because there's so much rejection and failure in sales. Just focus on what you need to do day to day. And if you do that repeatedly over the week and over the month and all the rest, the results will come. You just need to do the behaviors.
I love it. Again, that's Tom Nation, a Sandler trainer from England. Sandler Summit. And Tom mentioned Emily Jeffes' speech at the last virtual summit. So you can find that on our YouTube channel, or you can look for our upcoming free events and webinars. Learn more on this topic, or reach out and get some help right now, Sandler.com. Until next time, whatever you are, be a good one. That's what I always say. I'll see you next week.